Okay, we're on now the second lesson for the day, and we're already 10:45. Can you believe that? I guess you can. But it is really a lot that we're doing here in a short period of time. Okay, we're going to define, this is our roadmap again, it's our objectives of this lesson. We're going to talk about medication therapy, we're going to name the sources of medicines, we're going to look at abbreviations. Now what's happened about abbreviations recently, in the hospital even, is we are not allowed to use many abbreviations. I cannot say QD, which means every day, in writing, because it could possibly be misinterpreted by the way my handwriting is, or if I'm even typing in the computer, there are different things that could be misinterpreted. So they're actually discouraging nowadays abbreviations. So there's no need for you to learn a whole lot of abbreviations, but we will look at the ones that deal with time, and mostly with time, so that you'll kind of know, because you may see those. Although when a medication is ordered and it says Q day, the pharmacist will write every day on your label. So your MAR then should say every day. You're not going to be using abbreviations on your MAR. If it says twice a day, BID, if that's what the pharmacist gets, the label should say twice a day. And your MAR should say twice a day, and then you have the 2 times down. One of the things that I get calls about, and one thing you may be concerned about if you receive a medication and it says twice a day, is you may wonder, what should those 2 times be? Generally, they take 2 times a day. Maybe it's 7 in the morning, 7 at night. But can this one be given at 7 in the morning and 5 at night? If you go, do any of you go with your resident to a doctor's visit? Okay. So when you go for the doctor's visit, you're listening too as to what they're saying, and we'll talk about visits somewhat later in a later day. But you need to be able to read what they write. Now, have you seen those prescriptions? Can you read it? No. No. No, they don't. They write it in a apothecary system, and they send it to you in a household system. And so it's hard for you to read what they have written. But if you're interacting there, you can say, would you please tell me what this says? Or you need to know a person in the office. I always say, you've got to get your face in there and let them know you, the office nurse, the physician, because when you call them on the phone, they're going to think you're just like the client if they don't know who you are. And they're not going to want to tell you because you may not understand. So you need to be there, know them. And you do know them now, don't you? And there's someone in that office that if the physician leaves and that person comes back in to say, this is the prescription, you can say, would you please let me know exactly what this says so I'll know that what I'm getting is correct. Because sometimes the doctor might have said to you, I'm going to give him 5 milligrams once a day. And the nurse comes in and says, this says he's going to get 2.5 milligrams twice a day. And you say, that's not really what he told me. He said 5 once a day. And I realized that 2.5 is 5 in total, but he told me 5 once a day. Well, what he did is he rethought it as he was getting ready to write it. So, first of all, did he have it written right on here or on here? He wrote it here and he wrote it here. Or why did he rewrite it? And if he says twice a day, what does he mean? What time? Does it have to be 12 hours apart? Or can it only be 8 hours apart? So you see how you can answer some of those questions while you're right there. If that's not happened to you before, believe me, it'll happen to you one day. We're going to talk about where medicines come from, their names, abbreviations, and factors that influence how effective that medicine is. That's real important to know. Okay, let's see where we are. We're on the first page, medication therapy. And this is the definition of therapy, and it's right there in your book. It's a treatment by the use of substances that do these 4 things to disease. They either cure the disease, relieve the disease, prevent the disease, or diagnose the disease. Now, we're dealing most of the time with medicines that relieve or cure. You can't always cure, but you can relieve many times. So that's the definition of it. Now, this is where we get medicines from. Back in the old days with all those little powders behind the physician's desk, the first thing were plants. And remember in Wizard of Oz how Dorothy got so tired walking through the poppy fields? Well, that was opium she was walking through. So that's why she got so sleepy. And digitalis, which we hear about because it's a heart medicine, is made from a plant called foxglove, which you can go to Aiken's nursery and buy. So medicines, and lots of medicines, have come from plants. Just like foods have come from plants. But they just learned that those things, and actually penicillin is kind of a plant because it grows. It's just not a plant like we're used to seeing. Now, I don't know, I have that in there, and I evidently read it somewhere to say pharmaceuticals, but I don't know if that's really been a coined phrase. But many things have come from animals, and these are some of the things. We actually got, what do you take with insulin? I mean, it's insulin. Okay, diabetes. Okay, we got insulin from the pig pancreas because insulin comes from pancreases. And so initially that was one of the places we got insulin. Horse urine to venoms, you can see are antidotes. Actually, the urine is possibly one of the things that we used for antibiotics. Not antibiotics, but immunizations. And you know, immunizations also are put into, when we're making an immunization, it may be put into some kind of egg situation, so they'll say, are you allergic to eggs? In fact, they don't let children have eggs sometimes until a certain age because they know they're going to be giving them an immunization that's grown in that. Minerals, that's that mineral right out of the ground. Calcium, potassium, sodium, potassium, iron, that's what that is. Came right from the ground. And nowadays, even though we still see this for sure, and some of this, we see a lot of synthesized, ones that they make, they put together, they combine. There's a lot of combinations. And those are, let me just see if there's something I'm going to forget if I don't do that. Those are put together and synthesized. They're constantly being redone because drugs become tolerant. They no longer work. And antibiotics, we see that a whole lot. And that's why they don't want you to take an antibiotic if you don't need it. And if you do take it, you take it. Because otherwise, the bug you're trying to kill is going to become resistant to that antibiotic if it doesn't get enough to kill it. And now that bug is going to be more virulent. And so we found that a lot of our older antibiotics are not working anymore for some of our, that's why the bug is resistant. It's methicillin, that MRSA means methicillin resistant Staph aureus. Well, it isn't just methicillin resistant now, it's resistant to a whole bunch of things. That was when it was first named. And so we have to use vancomycin. Well, now some things are vancomycin resistant. So the doctor really is not responsible if it gives you medicine that you really don't need, and you're not responsible if you don't take the medicine that's been ordered for you. Take it as ordered. You're going to feel better, but you finish it. So if you've got bottles of medicine in your cabinet that you thought you might save for the next time you didn't feel good, that is not really to your benefit. Okay, and drug does come from a Dutch word, which means dry, because many times they were dry. Staph aureus, and that's A-U-R-E-U-S, I think. That's just, and you always have heard of MRSA, oh, MRSA. And once you have MRSA in a wound, you've got it in your body, and you're going to break out with it again, but we can keep it settled. Actually, what I do now, besides my community homes, is I'm a wound nurse, wound and ostomy, and I do that on a part-time basis and very part-time, and I'm thinking of giving it up. I'm wanting to really retire. Okay, So our next thing is medication names, and that's on the page 222. And these are the different ways that we see medications. This is not new to you. Generic and trade isn't for sure. But if you look up a medication, you're going to first see its chemical name. This is the chemical recipe that's put together. And that chemical name is very long and difficult. This is phenobarbital, chemically. You don't want to know that, do you? No, but it's in there in the physician's desk reference, the PDR, which we really don't use a lot anymore because we have a computer. But there it is. That is how it's 5 of this and 5 of that and equals this. And but that's its chemical name. So we don't really see that, but it's one of the names. And then its generic name is phenobarbital. Did you realize that was the generic of phenobarbital? And generally, it's of course much shorter than the chemical. In fact, that's a short chemical. But it also is not capitalized because it's not a trade name. Like Dottie is capitalized, but girl is not. That's the name. This is the person. Okay. So then the trade name is actually the brand name or the manufacturer's name. This is the brand name of phenobarbital. We never see that, Barbital or Luminar. Remember, there's several trade names. We never see that because phenobarbital has always come to us generically when we didn't even talk generically. But we have a lot of others. Diphenhydramine is Benadryl. And if you will look, do my little lesson and go to the store and look up sleep aids of different kinds. Sleepies, the different sleep aids. What is it? Benadryl. It's diphenhydramine. Because we all know that if you take Benadryl, you're going to get sleepy. What's added to Tylenol PM so that you're sleepy? Benadryl.
Why don't you ever get used to sleeping drugs?
You do become tolerant, and we're going to use that term today. Or tomorrow, or the next class, we may get into that. But you do become tolerant to drugs. There's some that you become more tolerant to. In fact, if you take Benadryl every day, you're not going to be as sleepy after a month as you were after the first day, because you now would have to take more. And sleeping, have you noticed on the ads, and you probably you probably record and fast forward through all commercials. But if you will watch commercials on drugs, it is very interesting to listen to what they say. And on sleeping medicines, it says that you should not take them more than so many weeks because you're going to become tolerant to it. The same thing, a really bad one is an antihistamine. Any of the antihistamines, Claritin, even the non-drowsy ones, it's best to take them for a short period during the time that you're reacting to something like right now is ragweed. If this is your time that you get runny nose and sneezy and watery eyes, then you take your Claritin or whatever. But you don't take it all year round. It works better for a short period of time because we do build up tolerance. Alcoholics are tolerant because that person can come to you looking perfectly non-drunk, but they've had a lot to drink. So they've built up a major tolerance. The same way with drug addicts. And if they come in the hospital, they're not going to get the benefit of a pain pill like you would because they're too tolerant of that. So they're going to require more to feel better. And I won't go into what they do about that as far as addicts with pain. Okay, weights and measurements. This is our system, and it should be right here, maybe the next page. Oh, and right here is showing on 23, 24, 25. That is nothing you have to memorize. It's just showing you some brand names and generic names of different drugs. And if you're taking any of those brand names, you might look over and see what that is. Or if you are taking one of the generics, look over and see what its trade name is, one of them. But what it didn't do right here is it capitalized the generic, didn't it? So it's not doing what I just said it was going to do. But you certainly see it shows here. I want to Benadryl, and what's the other one that is Dramamine? Let me look at Dramamine. This is another one.
Yeah, it's down to the bottom. 23.
Here it is. Now look at Dramamine down there. Benadryl is diphenhydramine. Dramamine is diphenhydramine. Well, it says Dramamine, diphenhydramine. That's not, it's diphenhydramate. Let me see if Benadryl is diphenhydramate. Am I wrong there? No, it's,
Benadryl's diphenhydramate.
but it isn't. It's really diphenhydramate. But anyway, or either I'm wrong. But there's a lot of things that are very close. Okay, let's get over to weights and measures because we've only got an hour left and we've got a lot to do. Okay, apothecary is a system. There's 3 systems that you could have drugs written in the order. They can use an apothecary system, a metric system, or a household system. Now, the physician uses the apothecary system and the metric system. They're going to say, I'm going to write this in, let me see where my system's on here. I'm going to write this in drams or grains. I'm going to say they need 5 grains of ASA. That's 5 grains of aspirin. And their 5 is going to be written as a Roman numeral. Now this SS is a half. So let's say they're going to give you 5.5 of something, or 5.5 of the drams. They would write it like that. This is 3.5. You see how that is? That's the way, that's why it looks so funny on that prescription. It looks like a Chinese menu. And you don't recognize these symbols because they write it in, and they actually, the use of dram is written like this. It looks like I don't know what that, a Z with an extra loop. And an ounce is just one, doesn't have that extra loop, it's just like this, that's an ounce. And then they put that 3.5 under it. So it does look weird. So when you see that written in an apothecary system, you don't know what that says. And it's written in generically, so you don't know what that is. So they can tell you then what it is if you ask. But then that goes, and then sometimes it's in grams, which is part of our metric system. Or we talk about liters in the hospital, and when you talk about how much they get in an IV, they get a liter. So we talk about all these different systems. But when that comes home to you, it comes home to you in a household system. For instance, 5 cc's, which is actually part of the metric system, is 1 teaspoon. It's also 1 dram. Because they order babies things as a dram, but it's really a teaspoon. But when you get the Tylenol for babies or for children, it says 5 cc's. That's a teaspoon. And you have a little cup that you can measure as a cc's. But if you look at that cup and turn it around, you're going to see a dram and you're going to see a teaspoon. So this is the way, these are the weights and measures. You don't have to memorize those. You need to realize that if you see it one way and another way, those two have to be the same. And you can look it up on your iPhones. I don't have an iPhone. I'm thinking about it. But, and we always say like plus and minus 10%. For instance, Tylenol is 300 milligrams. Aspirin is 5 grains. There's 600, and it's actually 320. There's 60 milligrams in a grain. So each grain of aspirin is equal to 60 milligrams. 5 times that is 300. So a Tylenol and aspirin is the same, although it may say 320 on that Tylenol, but it's plus or minus 10%. So, but nowadays you're seeing aspirin written more in milligrams. We always say grains. And the one that's written the most is the low dose, the baby size aspirin, which is what that is, low dose, and it's 81 milligrams. Let's see over here under your conversion. What I always liked was looking at the ounce. An ounce is 30 cc's. And that's what you see on the top of Pepto-Bismol. You see that little cup? And it says a tablespoon. Well, that's half of that. It's 15 cc's. Or if you want to have 2 tablespoons, that's the whole ounce. That's 30 cc's. But you look at that cup, and it tells you exactly all of those measurements. But if you took a tablespoon out of your kitchen drawer and you measured it, it would not be accurate. Now, a measuring tablespoon should be accurate. but that to me is interesting. A milliliter and a cc are the same things. You see that a teaspoon and a gram is the same thing. We don't use larger measurements, but you will be seeing things written as cc's, milliliters, teaspoons, tablespoons, mostly in the household systems. The pharmacist receives it in apothecary and dispenses it in household. And those are your equivalents. Like I said, you don't need to learn them. Here's that medicine cup and it will tell you all the way around. It's not a good picture there, but it'll tell you what equals what. These are some ways to use liquid measurements that are very accurate and are good for children especially. And sometimes I've had residents that will take one medicine only by liquid and another one they'll take by pill. For some reason, and it could be the slipperiness of that pill, that they'll take that one but they won't take the other. And again, so we'll have something that is always going to be measured. If they're always going to take it in a liquid, we've got to get the best measuring system we can. This is what we see a lot in the nursing home, where they actually pull it up in a syringe. They turn the bottle upside down because this is a syringe for liquid oral medicines. And you just pop that into the bottle top and you can pull up the amount. So you get an accurate measurement when we're talking. Do you know that Dilantin comes in a cc is like 25 milligrams, which there's 5 cc's in a teaspoon. So that's 125 milligrams. If you're giving them an extra cc, you're giving them 150 milligrams. So a lot of times when we're talking about measurements of things, and one thing that people get confused on is they say, well, this is 25 milligrams and this is 25 milligrams, and you're taking 100 milligrams, you're taking an awful lot. Well, they don't necessarily are the same at all. Your 100 could be just as strong, or not any stronger than this 0.12, depending upon the medicine and how it was made. So don't try to do apples and oranges. The only time that 25 is equal to 25 is if they're both the same medicine. Here's another dropper thing. These are just a bunch of things. This is actually what we need to mention now is about scored and unscored. You are not to alter a medicine. So you're not going to get a scored tablet, which means this can be cut. It cannot be cut if it's not scored. Have you ever tried to cut an aspirin? What do you get?
A lot of powder.
You get a lot of stuff, crumbs. You see a piece that looks like this is half, I could take this. But you have to throw the rest away, it's just crumbs. Because if you took all of it, you might as well taken the pill. So it does not cut equally if it's not scored. Now, if your physician has ordered a medicine for you and says cut it in half and take half in the morning, half in the evening, and it doesn't cut exact, what he's saying is, I want you to divide it, but it's okay because I want you to have this much all day. So don't be concerned if you're cutting something and you say it doesn't cut evenly. But generally, when things need to be cut, they're scored. So you can take a half of something and know it's an equal amount. We're not going to deal with that though. It should come to you in your blister pack. And you understand what I'm saying. I guess I didn't identify that correctly when I said blister pack in the first place. But that's your package of pills. It comes to you already in half. Okay, if it's unscored, it's oftentimes not just a pill, but something else that looks slippery. And that could be either enteric-coated or sugar-coated. And let's talk about what's the difference in that. And it says right there in your book that enteric-coated means that it will pass through the stomach before it can be dissolved or unchanged. It's treated in such a way that coating keeps it from dissolving in your stomach. Ecotrin. Has anyone heard of Ecotrin? It's an older drug. It's aspirin with an enteric-coated cover. That's where it gets its EC, Ecotrin. It's an enteric-covered aspirin. Aspirins are very harmful to the stomach. If you are taking aspirin for arthritis, you're not going to be taking an aspirin that is not enteric-coated because they They don't want to hurt your stomach with that aspirin. So it's going to go on. Our stomach begins the digestive process, but not with a lot of digestive juices. It's the small intestine that all of those very harsh digestive juices come into. So your small intestine is better able to tolerate the breakdown of aspirin. The stomach can't handle it.
So you definitely don't want to cut those in half.
No. So she says, and that's a perfect statement. Anything that is special, like enteric-coated or sustained release, cannot be crushed, cut in half. And what's your question?
Also, if it's cold, then it passes through the stomach to the small intestine.
That's great. That's correct. Only enteric-coated. Sugar-coated is different. Sugar-coated just means they put that over it so it slides. I always check them out. Here's a acetaminophen. Yeah, it looks like a capsule, but it's powdery. Here's one. Oh, good, it's got a sugar coating on it. I don't like pills that aren't sugar-coated because I don't like to swallow them if they're dry. So most of them, and the coating, they say it's sugar-coated. I'm not positive exactly. Maybe they're now, sugar-free coated. I don't know. But the only way you do know what's around it, it's not by looking at it. It's by reading about it. And don't you get a formulary with the medicine? When you get medicines yes, and when you get them for your resident, they give you paperwork. You read it. You read every bit of it. Now, one thing I've noticed the pharmacists do that I go to is that if they've been giving you that, they quit giving it to you after a while. But they have to give it to you if you ask. So if you're working with a resident that's been in in supported living for a while, but it's your first time working with them and you're getting the medicine and you don't see the paperwork, you ask for it because they have to give it to you. That is a law. It's been passed by the pharmacy group that says that they have to inform you, and it originally meant they had to talk to you, but they quickly figured it out that they could give you paperwork rather than talk to you, and because they were busy. So the truth is, if you ask them, they have to talk to you too. I want to know something about this medicine. Is it okay to give it 12 hours apart or 10 hours apart? Or is it okay, to shorten that time? When you take an antibiotic, do you often think about the 3 times a day you take it or the 2 times? Do you divide those hours equally? Most of the time you don't. You say breakfast, lunch, and supper. Our breakfast is